Hello, this is Ian Stewart, and welcome to the People of Earth podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the People of Earth podcast, where we interview some of the top performers in the New York City world music scene. Before we get into this week's interview, I want to make a couple announcements on behalf of the People of Earth ensemble. First and foremost, thank you for everybody who attended our last performance last week on February 6th at Brooklyn Bowl, and special thanks, obviously, to Gabe Kirchheimer for putting the show together, and Roe and the Nomads for opening for us. Just so you know, there are a few upcoming performances from People of Earth in the next few months, so stay tuned. I'll be announcing them, periodically as the podcast episodes come up, and you can actually check out when a couple of them are on the band's website at peopleofearthmusic.com. Okay, all announcements aside, let's get to today's interview. Our guest for this week is Richard Padrón. Richard is a guitarist living in New York City. He plays for a variety of different groups, and he's performed and toured with Lauryn Hill, Zé Luis Oliveira, and a number of other groups both in the Cuban music scene and also in the Brazilian and Latin jazz scene as well. He's also written and recorded music for several independent films and leads his own band, the Richard Padrón Group, which you'll actually be hearing a couple of samples of that in this podcast. This interview was really fun for me because it was really interesting for me to hear about Richard's journey and kind of carving out a niche for himself in the music scene here in New York. He does a few different things and wears many hats as an artist, and has formed a really defined opinion about where he kind of places himself within particularly the Cuban music scene as a guitar player, and especially as an electric guitarist, which is just, there really aren't that many people playing that instrument in that style of music here in New York City. So to kind of hear how he kind of formed his concept, which is pretty unique to him and the music that he writes and arranges, is really fascinating and very cool to listen to for me. All right, after all that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy Richard Padrón. Thank you. Richard, thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so why don't you talk a little bit about your background, where you come from, and how you've found a place for yourself in the kind of world music scene in New York City, especially your role as a guitar player in the Cuban music scene here in New York.
Well, I'm originally from Cuba. I was born in Guanajuato. Mm-hmm. My family lived in Peñabel, which is a small rural part of Guanajuato.
Okay.
Guanajuato Campo. And we moved to Miami when I was about almost 5 years old.
Okay.
We were able to get everyone out through a special visa that Ronald Reagan was distributing or making that visa accessible to political prisoners in Cuba. So I think he gave out maybe 40,000 or something like that. That might be an arbitrary number, but
yeah, I've heard of some other people that I know that went through that too.
Yeah, so we were I was fortunate enough to skip the 90s in Cuba, the special period.
Right. Yeah.
Very grateful for that, and it was very humble beginnings in Miami. Grew up in an immigrant household. Mm-hmm. I was also very fortunate that my parents never ended up speaking English.
Really?
At home. Well, they to this day they barely speak English.
Not an uncommon thing in Miami, but
right. You can get away with it. You can get away with it in Miami for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I also developed a strong Cuban identity, which is very independent from my American identity, but of course,
right,
they somehow go back and forth, and they support each other in a way.
Yeah.
And then I didn't start playing music. I was actually a visual artist to in the beginning. I was drawing.
Yeah. Okay.
And I got into. I was accepted into an art school.
Yeah.
For middle school, but I never ended up going because it was in a bad neighborhood, and my parents didn't want me to go to that school in that quote unquote bad neighborhood.
Okay.
You can imagine whatever else is around that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept on with art.
Yeah.
And then around the age of 11 or 12, close to the end of 6th grade, I took up an interest in the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And the elementary school that I was attending had music classes and art classes, which is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. You know, this is before, I suppose maybe it was just a very good school, but this was before the decline of education.
Right. Before maybe, the culling of the arts in American schools.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So I was fortunate enough to be exposed to that. And they had guitars, and they had a guitar class. So I took the guitar, I signed up, and very quickly, in about a week, I was moved into the advanced class. After just taking some sheets home, I learned all the open notes, and I was reading music, and they just bumped me up to the advanced class in less than a week.
Okay.
And then from there, I kept on playing guitar and studying, and I wanted to go into middle school playing guitar, but in middle school they didn't have a spot for guitar. I had to actually join the concert band if I wanted to play guitar in a jazz band.
I see.
Right? So then I chose a clarinet, started playing clarinet, and then very quickly I got moved up to second chair, and I ended up having to play electric bass in the jazz band, not guitar, because they didn't need a guitar player, they needed a bass player.
Okay.
So then I picked up bass, and I learned bass clef, and I was playing bass all of a sudden, and playing guitar and clarinet.
Oh, okay.
And I was at that point I was very interested in composition. Mm-hmm. I was exposed to jazz and all kinds of other music. And then I went to high school, and then I continued with clarinet. I was second chair in high school. I was first chair in middle school eventually, and then went to high school. Played guitar in the jazz band, played clarinet in the marching band and the symphonic orchestra, the wind ensemble really. And then they didn't need 2 second chair clarinetists, so then I ended up having to play E-flat contralto clarinet. And I was still fooling around with bass, but the bass player was too good, so then I stopped playing bass. And this was 9th grade, and I through the grapevine I heard about a performing arts high school in downtown Miami, and that sparked my interest because I absolutely detested regular high school. I didn't want to be in gym class. I didn't want to do any of that shit. Yeah, I just wanted to play music.
Yeah.
And I was at that point I had straight A's. It was all the academics were very easy. It all seemed very, very just breezy. Mm-hmm. So I started practicing guitar really, really heavily.
Yeah.
Classical guitar. I had been taking guitar lessons for quite some time, and I signed up for the audition for New York School of the Arts. I went and auditioned, and I got accepted. But before this, if I was thinking if I was going to stay, if I didn't make it into the performing arts high school, if I was going to stay in regular high school, I wasn't going to march clarinet again because that's super lame.
Yeah.
So I ended up learning marching snare drum. I was practicing, but at that time my practice regimen was so intense that in 6 months, when it came time to audition for the drum line, I had beat all of the senior snare drummers, and as a 9th grader, they gave me the center snare position.
Okay, all right.
And because I progressed very quickly.
Yeah.
I was practicing on pillows and
yeah.
really, really going insane. And as the drum instructor gave me the results that I became the center snare guy, my dad drives up to pick me up with the acceptance letter from New World.
Yeah.
The performing arts high school that I had been accepted as a guitarist. So right then and there, I gave up the position, and I said, I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to go to a real school. to play music.
Right.
So and that was the beginning of what is now my musical career, you know, and if you analyze all of the people from Miami that are up here doing great things, such as the Stricklands and the Rodriguez brothers, Martin Bejarano that was playing with Roy Haynes or is still playing with Roy Haynes. I don't even know. Obed Calver, Kenny Grahowski, all of these people.
Right.
They all went to that same high school.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, so it's a very prestigious school for the arts, not just for music, but you know, Alvin Ailey. I mean, it goes up. It goes all, you know, down the list.
It's like Interlochen for Florida. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Puts out very highly competitive graduates.
Right. So and I, you know, it was basically my college and high school all in one, because I received a lot of college credits, and especially considering I didn't continue.
That's right. You didn't go to college.
I didn't go to college.
Yeah.
Because it was just too much money. It was too much money. I mean, New School accepted me after high school. I went up to New York. I auditioned for Manhattan School of Music, and New School. They both accepted me, although Manhattan School of Music gave me zero money, and New School gave me almost $20,000.
Right.
At that time, which was pretty much $2,000 short of a full scholarship.
Right.
So I said, "Cool, that's really cool." But once I realized that my parents couldn't help me with paying for anything because they weren't in a financial position,
right,
to help me with anything. Once I realized that, and I received a letter from New School that was asking me for a $300 deposit to ensure my spot.
Yeah.
That the reality just hit me so
oh wow.
Strongly, you know, just forcefully just hit me.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, this is a business. They need me to pay them $300 to let them know that I want to go. It just seemed like a bunch of BS. So I said, you know what?
It is.
This is just seems too sinister. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to do this. So I just stayed around in Miami for a semester trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
I tried working at Guitar Center. That was highly unsuccessful. I got fired. And you know, so I stayed in Miami for about 2 years. And in that time, I started playing with well, even before graduating from high school, I was already playing with you know, Ira Sullivan and Gary Campbell, and then after high school, I was playing with those guys plus Carlos Abrahoff, the late Carlos Abrahoff, which was my first Cuban jazz type of exposure. Before that, I was mostly into American jazz, believe it or not.
Right.
I didn't really have much of an interest in my own music.
Yeah.
Which was weird, but that's just the way it turned out, because in New World, they really just focused on American jazz.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I didn't want anything to do with Alan Holdsworth or Scott Henderson or anything.
Okay.
I just wanted to eat, breathe, you know, sleep Wes Montgomery, Grant Green, Pat Martino.
Right.
And that was the deal. And then closer to my senior year, I started getting into all of the fusion stuff that really took me into a different direction and shaped my current identity and
Which
direction.
Were all the names you just mentioned?
Yeah. I mean, not so much Scott Henderson, but definitely Alan Holdsworth and John McLaughlin.
Oh, okay.
Those were the two top
Yeah.
things that when I heard, which actually the person responsible for this is Ernesto Simpson.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Because we were hanging out very early one morning after much
in Miami.
Okay, after much partying or whatever else, and he played these recordings, and I was completely blown away.
How old were you?
I was like 18.
18. Okay.
18 years old, and we were playing 18, 19 years old, and we were playing with Carlos Abrahoff together.
Okay.
You know, so at this time I was also hanging out with Ernesto, Armando Gola, and Felipe Lamoglia, and these guys. I attribute my very first exposition to Cuban music and the fact that I knew nothing about Cuban music at that time to them, because they took me under their wing, and we were a sort of quartet. We would get together and play all the time. So obviously I was the youngest one in that group.
Yeah.
But they schooled me on all this Cuban stuff. We were playing jazz, really, and I was writing music, and we were playing my tunes, but they said, look, this is you need to check this out. You know, if you're Cuban, which you are, you need to be checking this stuff out.
Yeah, yeah.
So I said, all right. So all of a sudden, then I realized that there was this whole other world that was mine. That I needed to incorporate into my playing and my music.
Mm-hmm.
So then all of the recordings that my dad played for me as a kid, pushing all these recordings, Idakere, El Beni, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, right.
Then all these things started making sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started going back and studying more of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 2 years of doing that, this pianist who also went to New World, who was a very successful songwriter, also an incredible pianist, David Siegel.
Mm.
He said, "Oh, I'm producing a rock band up in New York, and I know you want to move to New York. Are you interested in playing in this rock band? It will give you a good excuse to move to New York."
Yeah.
And I said, "Sure, let's do it."
Yeah.
And he paid for my flight. He paid for the shipping of all my equipment. He got me in touch with the leader of the rock band. So then that girl, Danielle Spiegler, let me stay in her pad for about a month. Got me a job, working in a women's clothing store, which I worked there for 3 years. And luckily enough, the manager of that clothing store, her husband was a musician. So then she saw that I was very serious, and she let me make my own schedule. I could leave for rehearsals and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And during this time, I was then hitting the New York music scene, going out every night.
Yeah.
I was living out, way out in Kensington, when the Q train was under construction, and the MTA still is a mess.
Oh God.
It's more of a mess now than it ever was. But back then it was a mess, and they wouldn't let you know anything. It was ridiculous. So it was a very difficult first 3 to 5 years.
What year did you move here?
2003.
Okay, all right.
So I graduated from high school 2001.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then from Kensington, I moved to Astoria. I was living with a girlfriend at the time, and then we broke up, and then I moved to Jackson Heights.
Right.
Had some roommates, and by that time I was independently just living off of music.
Mm-hmm.
I was having to teach, and I had at a certain point I had like 4 different teaching jobs.
Okay.
And I was playing a million gigs with whomever. And then I moved out of that Jackson Heights place. Too long of a story to get into. And then I moved to Astoria, which I'm still living in the same apartment.
Yeah.
And that's where I built my studio. I've always been into engineering and electronic music.
Okay.
So that's also another tributary.
Yeah. How does like because I've seen your home studio, and like how does like the whole recording thing fit into your career at this point, or maybe how it developed,
Yeah, well, I have I consider him to be my brother or mentor, family, my Brazilian family in New York City.
Yeah.
Through him, how did I meet him? I met him through this guy named Michael Amorte, and I don't know how I met Michael. I think it was in El Taller Latinoamericano.
Yeah.
And I was there, and I met him, and then he said, "Man, you're great. I want you to play on some sessions in my band." Yeah. And then that's why I met Zé Luis Oliveira, which is my Brazilian brother, mentor, family guy, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I started hanging with Zé, and he is this super important saxophone composer from Brazil. Mm-hmm. He's probably one of the most recorded sax players ever from Brazil, and he's been living in New York for almost 30 years or whatever, maybe more than that. And he saw that I was also into composing and obviously playing guitar. He got me to play in his band, and then I started showing him all these tracks that I've been making on Reason on a crappy PC that my sister gave me a long time ago, my first computer, and I would literally have Reason, which a friend of mine from, I can't remember his name, Red, his nickname was Red, he installed Reason on that computer, and then I would just program all these drum and bass tracks, because I was really into electronic music, Aphex Twin, and especially Aphex Twin, and I wanted to make stuff like that, so I would just make my own sounds and program everything with a mouse, with a damn mouse. It would take ages.
Yeah.
So then I showed Zé all these tracks, and you know, he started showing me all this Brazilian music, and then I got really into Brazilian music. I ended up speaking Portuguese, which I'm still developing and cultivating. And I've been somehow accepted into the Brazilian music scene, which is as closed as the Cuban scene. So I've been playing Brazilian music, and then Zé Luis, he saw that I really needed help, and he gave me his old G4 once he upgraded to a G5. And I started using Cubase and all these different software to record back in Jackson Heights when I was living there.
Okay.
But at that time, I was still just programming using Reason. I didn't have a keyboard. And then when I moved to Astoria, then I bought a Mac Mini right before going on tour with Lauryn Hill. And my girlfriend at the time loaned me some money. I bought all this stuff, and I went on tour. When I came back, then I had a computer and some stuff to play with, and that's how I started developing myself as a basically an engineer.
Yeah.
And as a producer, and then I got really into it. I put more money into it, and I hooked up my apartment. I have these clouds that I designed with moving blankets that are suspended from the picture moldings, and one is right over the room in the middle. One is over the control room, folded 4 ways, and then using moving blankets, I was able to devise a way of getting isolation between the acoustic bass and the drum set.
Yeah.
So initially, I was going to record drums, build a booth under my bed, which was a ridiculous endeavor. So I said, you know what, I'm just gonna fit the drum set in the room somehow. Kenny did it somehow, very tight, and I used the moving blankets, and then we started just recording my record.
Right.
Which is about to be released this year. And
is this your first record as a leader?
My first record as a leader, yeah.
Okay.
It took a long time to get to that point, but initially I either, the money I had before moving from Jackson Heights to Astoria, I said, well, I either get my own apartment or I record a record. So I said it's better to get my own apartment, because then it might take longer to record a record, but I will be in a better position to produce music and record and to function as a composer, independent composer, if I have my own studio.
Yeah.
So
it's a great idea.
Yeah. So it took a little longer, but I did it, and then the biggest deal was upgrading my interface. I at that time I bought an Apogee Ensemble, and then Jason Ennis, right when we were about to, who's a great guitar player.
Yeah.
I know Jason. You know Jason.
Yeah.
He somehow had his hands on a Metric Halo 2882, or I think that's what it is. It's an interface, 8 channels, really good quality, and he let me borrow that thing. So then I had 16 other channels. We were recording the trio with 8 channels. So then he gave me that to borrow, plus a classic Neumann U87, plus a 414, plus a KM 187 pair. And all these ridiculous microphones, a channel of Chandler Limited preamp. So I had all this ridiculous gear, So then that's how we started recording.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and initially it was a trio. I had envisioned a trio because I didn't want it to be too obviously Cuban, so I didn't want to include all this percussion. And then I realized that that's stupid, because why would I want to diffuse my identity?
Okay.
I was still trying to figure out what I was doing with my identity, and I wasn't fully embracing the ethnicity that I'm bringing to the table.
And this is recent.
This is as of the last 5 years.
Yeah, well, I would say that's recent.
4 years.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, this is ridiculous. I think I need to just put percussion on this, because then it'll give it that the quarter that it's missing.
Yeah. Because
we're still playing these Cuban rhythms, but on instruments that aren't necessarily considered to be folklorically sane in regard to a Cuban sound.
Yeah, not traditional Cuban instruments.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Although, if you look at what the biggest influence was Gonzalo Rubalcaba.
Yeah.
And I knew Felipe and I knew Armando who were playing with him. And I love his playing. He's one of my biggest influences in terms of virtuosic development and just getting around the instrument. So I really tried modeling the way that I was approaching the guitar around the way that Gonzalo is playing the piano.
Okay.
And then my really, really good friend that I've known since I was about 12, Onel Mulet.
Yeah.
I said, man, I need help with this because at that point we had almost all the chord tracks recorded. And I said, man, I need to find someone that wants to help me out with these percussion parts. You know, I want to include jicamos and bata and all these bells and all these different instruments that belong in the music.
Sure.
And then he said, man, call Roman. Mm-hmm. I said, Roman, he's not gonna want to do it. And he said, no, man, he loves you. You're samurai. You know, this is what he calls me.
He calls you that?
Samurai, yeah, because of the law. I had super long hair.
Yeah.
And I had already been playing some gigs with the folkloric ensemble that he was fronting.
Oh, okay. Playing guitar in that?
Yeah.
Playing guitar in that. Okay.
Yeah. So I was playing guitar with all the folkloric people, and then I called Roman and he said, yeah, let's do it. You know. So initially we had to go to Roman's house to record because he has a very small setup. And that was the most frustrating process because the computer had so much crap bogging it down that it literally, from the point that you press record, it would take a minute for the damn thing to start recording. And then within that time, he would just, focus was all over the place. And, we were we were having a good time. I would bring over a bottle of chocolate vodka or something, and so we were drinking by midday, so it was a very organic, fun process.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help when the computer is not functioning.
Right.
So we got some recordings out of that, which I'm including, but then I said, man, this is not going to work. So I had my space was very hooked up for recording. So I said, let's just get a pair of congas in my house. I'll pick you up. We'll bring the wada drums, and my ex-girlfriend, who's an incredible artist, Marley Gilbert. She actually she wrote a bunch of lyrics, on the record for the record on some tunes, which are just incredibly surreal in terms of their creativity and the lucidity and just the beauty of the poetry. It's incredible. Okay. So she helped me, and we picked up Roman with all the drums, and these drums lived in my house for a while. And like that, Roman would take a trip over to Astoria, and we would just try to hammer out these recordings.
Yeah.
And after about a year of recording, we ended up finishing all the tracks.
Okay.
And then to finish the Bata recordings, Onel let me borrow his 3 drums, which are really cool, unique Bata drums. The Total is a little bit bigger, and the Ya, everything's tuned lower. I guess you can tune them, but Roman likes to not have the drums tuned. He likes to just come in, and if the drums are that way, according to the weather and whatever else is happening,
that's the way it should be.
Which some people don't agree with, but we went along with it. There was one time where he came in and the congas were too low, and he didn't bring a drum key. And I said, man, we have to get a drum key, man. We have to go get a wrench for this. Yeah. He's like, oh, come on, just leave him like that. No. We need to raise them just on this one song. It's too low. It's conflicting with the bass and everything. So anyway, so that was the process. And now we are pretty much finished, except for a string arrangement on 2 songs and one vocal part that Lara Bello is going to record. I met this incredible Cuban violinist and violist, Ina Paris, who's going to record the strings, just blaring it.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to her about it yet, but I think she's going to do it. And my friend Zé Luis is going to record an epic flute arrangement on which I kind of sketched it out, but I gave him free reins to take my idea and develop it. Mm-hmm. And he's going to record flutes on Norwegian wood, which I did a reharmonization of Norwegian wood, which completely takes it into a different place.
Right.
It's a whole nother planet. Mm-hmm. John Lennon is just a melody. Right. The rest of it is my concept. Mm-hmm. So that's where the record is currently.
Yeah.
It's almost finished.
Yeah. And you've been performing this repertoire live, right, with your own group?
Yes, we've been. This is actually how how we started doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We were playing trio, mostly. I explained prior that I wanted to diffuse the Cuban nature. I didn't want it to be so obvious.
Yeah.
Oh, but what's obvious about it?
Right.
It's still there, you know.
Yeah.
When Roman heard the tunes, he's like, "Oh, that's this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we could do this rhythm over it."
Right.
You know. Right. So then it ended up naturally having all this folklore that it was unintentional.
Right.
But because I grew up listening to this music and it's in my DNA.
Yeah.
It came out anyway. Mm-hmm. Without me wanting it to come out that way. Mm-hmm. So naturally, as a composer, I couldn't escape the integrity of my compositions. It came out, whether I wanted to or not.
Right.
So then we were playing as a trio, and it mostly for functional reasons, because it's a smaller format, easier to get guys paid. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't afford to be paying people out of my pocket.
Right. Sometimes
I have done that. But for the most part, we wanted to just keep it trio, just to keep it small. Mm-hmm. And we've been playing around, Fat Cat. I can't get Alex to get back to me at the Zinc Bar, so we don't play at the Zinc Bar. Terraza 7. Right. You know, all the people that actually want to get back to me and book me, I play them.
Right.
And the places that have guarantees, essentially.
Of course, yeah.
Also, another reason why I don't want to play at the Zinc Bar is because it's like, I've heard, last time I played there, I made like $40.
Right.
The same thing with Smalls. I mean, last time I played there was like I made $40. A long time ago with Benny Reed, we played the early set, and I walked out of it with $40. I said, I can't do this.
Yeah, I know.
So, and it's not just for me. I don't mind taking $40, but I can't pay my musician $40.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I sometimes get gigs for myself, here in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And that's exactly what I explain to the owners of the place. It's like, it's not me. It's like you can't get your sidemen to agree to come all the way out for for less than a certain amount. Why would you?
It's I mean, and I mean, there are some exceptions, but at least the place will have congas, so Roman can come from Jersey. I can give him whatever the $80 is, but at least he doesn't have to bring congas.
Right.
Or I don't have to lug an amplifier around. Example, the Zinc Bar doesn't have an amplifier.
Yeah.
So I have to, it's too difficult. It's too much of so I play at Fat Cat because they have a guarantee. I can pay everyone $125.
Yeah.
For a 6-person band.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's not like, oh my God, but it's great.
Well, to do something you like.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Especially for New York.
Yeah, exactly.
And
considering the place is like half a jazz venue, half a OK Cupid meetup place for college students,
and a gaming joint.
Yeah.
Which is, but I think that's part of the reason why they can help pay the band.
Yeah, there's always people in there, man.
Yeah, so I love that place,
Yeah.
And the bar next door, which is great.
Yeah, La Lanterna, right?
Yeah, they have an amp there. They have a drum set. There's a back line. I mean, this is a big deal when you're talking about bringing a band around in New York City.
Sure.
And so these are the places that we've been sticking to. I would like to expand our venue repertoire, but I mean, it is what it is, But recently we've been playing as a sextet, where I've been doing these arrangements of traditional Cuban tunes, where I've reharmonized the harmonic, obviously the harmonic content, to take it out of the very 1-4-5 rudimentary thing that is very present in Cuban music, and it even though it's beautiful in its simplicity, it gives it a very set dimension, where the harmonic support is not as important as the rhythmic content. So I and since I've been listening to so much Brazilian music,
right,
and part of the Brazilian music scene, thanks to Mr. Zé Luis Oliveira, I have been able to somehow subconsciously integrate whatever my own harmonic identity is, mixing that with the richness of the Clube da Esquina movement, which is Milton Nascimento, Beto Guedes, stuff like that, which is amongst the most harmonically advanced music in Brazil.
Right.
I mean, let alone all the other stuff, which is already adventurous harmonically.
Yeah, they've always had that.
The Minas, the music from Minas is just so far out. It's surreal. You know, if you listen to any of the Milton Nascimento records, you really get a sense of that how rich and how much of a harmonic universe they have over there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to bring that openness to Cuban music, which it doesn't have harmonically.
No.
Maybe certain tunes, but it's more about rhythm.
Yeah. Well, there's some. I mean, like like Climax brings in some overtly Brazilian things into Cuban music, but that's about all I can really think of that really does that kind of thing.
Or like Los Zafiros,
right?
You know, where it's kind of Brazilian, but it's kind of trying to be this doo-wop Brazilian thing, but not in. I don't want it to sound Brazilian.
Right.
I wanted it to retain the folkloric roots of Cuban music, having the same instruments, the same rhythms, or maybe putting something in 5 or something like that, but still has a clave or still has the same instruments and the same vibe.
Yeah.
But bringing in this open harmonic realm so that the montunos aren't always going to be over a 5-1,
right?
Or 4, flat 7, sharp 7-1, or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, that typical cadence.
Mm-hmm.
Which is great, but I'm kind of tired of hearing the same thing on every single band and song.
Right.
So I wanted to expand that, and I use these very typical Cuban songs because everyone knows the melodies. Mm-hmm. For example, Chan Chan. I may have altered one note here and there. I mean, people might hate me for it. They might want to crucify me for changing one note of the melody or whatever it is. But essentially, the audience can't tell the difference, and they recognize the song.
Yeah.
And it gets people dancing.
Mm-hmm.
So people, it doesn't the adventurous harmonic influence or representation isn't hindering the dance persona of the band.
Yeah, and you're the primary chordal instrument. There's no piano or anything like
that. There's no piano, and that's another thing that I wanted to, obviously, because I don't play piano. Mm-hmm. And I love playing with pianists. Mm-hmm. For example, I started playing with the Maestrissima Ariadne Trujillo, which I've known for a long time. We played in many ensembles together, and now I'm playing with her. There's no bass. They kicked out the bass players because they were showing up late or whatever else, and the person upstairs at Guantanamera was complaining because the bass was too loud or whatever else, and bass frequencies we all know that travel further. So there's no bass. So it's just me, Mauricio Herrera, and Ariadne. And believe it or not, this format works so perfectly well because I tend to play electric guitar like a classical guitarist would approach it with a classical guitar, where you have different voices moving at the same time. I studied a lot of classical guitar. Mm-hmm. So I end up playing the bass with a supportive harmonic element on top, or it could be more rhythmic along with the tumbadoras, but the bass is happening, and then she can support the bass on the left hand or not play it at all. Yeah. And just focus on filling up the montunos or whatever else. So we can switch back and forth with these roles. Mm. And then I'm having to sing, which is a brand new thing for me, and I'm slowly but surely I'm developing the independence. So I wanted to bring in the guitar back into Cuban music in New York, because if you look at, for example, country quote unquote country music in Cuba, mm-hmm. it's all guitar based, mm-hmm. and there's so many string instruments in Cuban music. Yeah, there's a freaking lute, there's the tres, mm-hmm. there's guitar, and again the way that the guitar is played isn't the way that I'm approaching it. Usually it's more of a strumming kind of thing. It's more of a basic fundamental approach to playing guitar. Mm-hmm. But checking out Manuel Barrueco and checking out Jose Angel Navarro, which are both classical guitar players, mm-hmm. I started seeing that, wow, the guitar can really do so much. And then Sergio Vitier, which is also a very important guitarist composer from Cuba, you start realizing that, wow, the guitar is such an important instrument in Cuban music, but somehow it's neglected in New York. For whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe it's that the people that are playing guitar are more singer-songwriter guitar players, and their approach to the guitar is more basic, so it doesn't necessarily lend itself to playing in an ensemble.
Right.
It's not flexible enough to play strummy guitar all the time. Isn't going to go well with a piano and percussion only.
Yeah.
It's not going to work because you need to be able to isolate the different counterpuntal parts. That's what counterpoint is, right? You have different parts working. 4-part harmony, Baroque music, right? So you have a bass part. The bass part is very important. So if you can't execute a bass part and with the independence needed to actually have 2 parts functioning at the same time, then it's not going to work in that ensemble. So then, therefore, the guitar isn't going to be included in those ensembles because it's not going to be musical. So that's part of it. You know what I mean? The function and the ability of the guitar players. You know, and for whatever reason, there don't seem to be that many Cuban guitar players that are dedicated guitarists playing at a high level in New York City. I don't know why. Yeah. I know Chigoy is in New York now, who's a legend.
Yeah.
You know?
He just got here, right?
He just got here. I mean, God bless, you know, thank God. But there aren't that many. I don't know who else is there.
I don't know.
Me neither.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to bring to the table is like, look, don't sleep on the guitar, guys. Like, this is important. This can also function.
Yeah.
Just as well, and the Montunos just as well as a piano. So, and also what happens is that it takes everything down an octave. So it starts having this rich lower register fullness because I don't have the extra octave that the piano does on either side.
Yeah.
And it's also weird to have to play stuff really high because the chords don't sound as rich up here on the high end of the neck of the guitar. So you're forced to bring everything down an octave according to the piano rule.
Right.
And to be able to get this richness out of the instrument. So I'm able to explore a different register. And then the singers are singing right above it. You know? Yeah. Because usually the Montunos are up here and the singers are in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas now the Montunos are here and the singers are right above it.
Interesting.
You know, so it kind of gives it a quirkier because it isn't being done.
Yeah.
That's the only reason.
Yeah. Not part of the traditional sound. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. It's not part of the traditional sound, but the traditional sound is only traditional because we've been listening to it for decades.
Of course, yeah.
That's the only reason why it's traditional, you know. And the guitar is a super important instrument in every single kind of music all over the world. And including Cuban music, but it's just it isn't really accepted in New York City because it is a very piano-centric world. Yeah.
Pretty much all the groups here are piano-led, you know, with very few exceptions.
Right.
Or maybe you have a trace splitter, you know, but
right.
But never, certainly not electric guitar very often.
No. But that's part of Cuban music as well. You know, so and the only experiences I've ever had playing in Cuban ensembles were in timba bands where I'm not playing that role of the guitar player.
Yeah, playing horn lines and
or just playing like funk guitar with a wah-wah,
right.
Taking these pseudo bluesy rock solos over timba, right? Which is weird.
Yeah,
I think it's strange. It's bringing the American influence instead of saying let's figure out what Cuban guitar is about, guys. You know what I mean?
Okay. So that's something you're very consciously trying to do.
I don't know if I'm trying to do it as much as I'm just doing it.
Right.
But it is a conscious decision.
Yeah.
To say, but it's not so much a decision as much as it is just, you know, a necessity because otherwise then I can't be on the gig. You know what I mean?
Right.
And also it makes it sound different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a harmonic realm that I'm residing in.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the fact that it sounds different just because of the instrumentation. So then, you know, I'm very, very fortunate to have Roman as part of the ensemble because he brings all this folkloric stuff.
Right.
But then, you know, I'm also working with Mauricio, Samuel Torres. So I'm lucky to have all these incredible percussionists interested. Or Carlitos Maldonado. Which brings me to another topic. I'm not sure how much time we have left.
As much time as you want.
Oh, okay. The classical music that I also write.
Yeah, okay.
So to date, I've written a 15 minute tone poem for orchestra. And I've written a string quartet. And I've written a slew of solo guitar studies that I've written mostly to develop my own technique. Because I use pick and finger hybrid picking, right? So the pinky is a very important finger, but there aren't any studies out there for the pinky. So I've had to write studies for the pinky to develop the meñique. So the pima is an pima, right? This is the instead of the index and the thumb are holding the pick, but then the middle finger becomes the index. The ring finger becomes the middle finger, and the pinky becomes the ring finger. So I've written these studies for that, and a few chamber works as well, a piano and clarinet piece that I wrote for the Transatlantic Ensemble, and they recorded it.
Oh, great! Oh, cool.
So I'm very much a composer in the fullest umbrella capacity that you can think of, and mostly because I've always wanted to write music for film. So this is also going back to the production, having a studio thing. Yeah. Where it has enabled me to develop myself as a film composer. So now I have a reel. I've scored about five shorts. Last year I was working on 2 years ago I was working on a documentary. So you know that's pretty much a condensed version of what my life musically is like. What my realm is about. Cool. Yeah. Definitely. When's your album going to be out? Do you know? It's going to be definitely. It's we are crowdfunding in the spring. Okay. Close to late spring, I would say, right before the summer. Okay. Before everyone takes off, and then we are releasing it in the fall. And where can you tell people where they could find out more about you online? Yes, my website, richardpadron.com. And I have a SoundCloud with a bunch of different tracks that if anyone is interested, they can license at soundcloud.com/Richard-Padrón. Okay. And let's see what else. I'm blanking here. Yeah, and you're saying where's your group playing most often these days? We don't have anything in the books. We just, for my birthday, we played at Terraza 7 because Freddie is a great human being and he's accessible. Yeah, I gotta get him on here actually. Yeah, you should definitely get Mr. Castiblanco on here. Definitely need to. And we don't have anything booked, man. It's hard to get stuff booked. Mm-hmm. You know how hard that is. Yeah, I do. Especially in New York, there's so many people, so many musicians that are incredible. I know, right? That they're deserving, even, and they should be playing. You know, so diminishing venues too. So, right. Yeah, which doesn't help. Nope. Yeah, we need. I think Mike Eckroth and I were making the joke. You know, it's like, man, if there were like 8 more Terraza 7s, we would never have to leave Queens. Right. You know, it's like. You know, because like we all just kind of live there, you know. Yeah, I know. Well, cool, man. This has been a really, really interesting interview, and thanks for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. And hopefully we'll have you back on here in the near future. I hope so too. I hope I didn't piss anyone off with anything that I said. I'll listen to it and find out. Okay. All right, man. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again for tuning in to the People of Earth podcast. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Richard Padrón. Again, you can check him out online at his website, richardpadron.com. And of course, for all other information on myself and People of Earth, you can check out peopleofearthmusic.com, as well as my own website, ianstewartbass.com. Thank you again, and see you next week.